I remember the exact sound of Daniel's chair scraping the courtroom floor before I fully understood what he had said. No, that's impossible. He didn't say it like a man trying to win an argument. It came out like something he shouldn't have heard himself think out loud. For a moment, nobody moved. Not the clerk, not the attorneys, not even me. Just that silence that feels heavier than noise. I'm Emma Carter. 2 days before that moment, Daniel's version of my life had already been written for the court. A broken veteran, a limited mother, someone whose body, according to them, had already decided what kind of parent she could be. They kept pointing to my left leg like it was evidence instead of bone and memory, like it told the whole story if you stared long enough. I didn't correct them, not because I agreed, because I had learned long ago that when people decide who you are, explanations don't reach them. Across the aisle, his wife sat perfectly still, hands folded, a soft, practiced smile that never seemed to belong to any single moment. She looked like she had already imagined the drive home after winning. I remember thinking something strange then. Not anger, just fatigue. Like I had been listening to the same sentence for too many years in different voices. Then Judge Eleanor Watkins asked for my military file, and something in my chest tightened before I even understood why. I had not seen that folder in years. When the clerk placed it on the bench, it didn't look dramatic, just a sealed document. Ordinary, quiet, heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. The judge broke the seal herself. No ceremony, no warning, just the sound of paper meeting fingertips. She began reading. At first, nothing changed in the room. Then she slowed. Then she stopped. Then she went back and read the same section again. That second time, I noticed her expression shift slightly. Not shock exactly. Something more controlled. Like recognition of a fact that doesn't belong in the case being argued. "It appears," she said finally, "this court has not been given Mrs. Carter's complete military history." I didn't look at Daniel right away. I didn't need to. I heard his chair move before I saw him. "No," he whispered. Then again, louder. "That can't be right." And only then did I turn my head slightly. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the folder like it had betrayed him personally. That was the first time I saw fear on his face that had nothing to do with custody. And the strange part was, I never hid any of it. He just stopped asking long before he stopped calling himself my husband. The judge lowered her eyes back to the file, and somewhere between her silence and his breathing, my mind slipped away. Not because I wanted to, because memory doesn't ask permission, it just arrives. I was back in an aircraft, North Carolina sky turning gray through a small, shaking window. Rain crawling down the glass like it didn't know where to go either. My ribs felt like they belonged to someone else. Every breath pulled something loose inside me, and my left leg. I remember the brace more than the leg. Heavy, unforgiving. A constant reminder that my body had started a conversation without me. The smell of antiseptic clung to my uniform like it had decided to come home with me. Home. That word kept repeating itself in my head like a promise I was afraid to test. Daniel. Noah. My son had been 3 months old when I left. I remember his head fitting into the curve of my shoulder like it was designed there. I told myself I would come back whole enough to make up for every missed night. I believed it. That belief feels different now when I think about it. Sharper, almost naive in a way I can't defend. The explosion didn't give me time to change my mind. One moment the convoy was moving. The next, light turned into smoke. The lead vehicle disappeared first, then another. Radio voices breaking apart into panic. I remember training doing something my fear couldn't stop, moving my body before I understood the risk. The burning vehicle. Heat that didn't feel real at first. A soldier trapped inside. My hands on his vest. Someone shouting my name like it was trying to pull me back. I remember going in for the second soldier. I remember turning. And then nothing stayed in order after that. Sound became pressure, light became weight. For a moment, I wasn't inside my body anymore, just suspended somewhere between impact and silence. When I woke up in Germany, the first thing I noticed wasn't pain, it was absence. My left leg didn't respond the way memory said it should. A doctor's voice came carefully from somewhere above me. Multiple fractures, pelvic damage, ribs, surgeries. Words arranged politely so they wouldn't sound like loss. "You'll walk again," he said. "It will take time." Time sounded manageable then. I didn't know yet that time would become something I had to rebuild myself inside of. Daniel came first while I was still in that hospital version of myself. He brought flowers I couldn't smell through the antiseptic air. He smiled too easily when nurses walked in, like he was trying to prove something about being okay. He held my hand during explanations. He kissed my forehead before leaving. At the time, I remember thinking that mattered more than anything. Now I don't know what I was really holding on to. 2 days later, he came again. No flowers this time, only a manila envelope. He didn't sit. That detail still stays with me. He stood near the bed like sitting would make the moment too permanent. "How's therapy?" I asked. He didn't answer. He placed the envelope on my blanket. The weight of it was small, the meaning of it wasn't. "I already signed everything," he said. I remember blinking at him, not understanding. "What is this?" He didn't look at me when he answered. "The divorce papers." For a few seconds, my mind refused to connect those words to anything real. "We have a baby," I said quietly. "I know. I'm still in the hospital. I know. I can't even stand up." His eyes moved, not to my face, but to the wheelchair beside the bed, then away again, like looking at me directly would make it harder for him to continue. I didn't marry someone I'd spend the rest of my life taking care of. The monitor beside my bed suddenly felt louder, beeping too clean, too steady. I kept waiting for him to correct himself, to say he was overwhelmed, scared, angry, anything that would make this temporary. But he didn't. That was the moment I realized something I couldn't admit at the time. He had already left, even while I was still wearing a hospital bracelet. 3 days after discharge, my brother Michael drove me home. I remember the house being too quiet before I even opened the door, like it had been waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. Inside, Daniel's side of the closet was empty. Not messy, not rushed, just gone. The wedding photographs we had once arranged together were missing from the walls, leaving pale squares of untouched paint behind. On the counter sat a folder from his attorney. Nothing else. That afternoon, my elderly neighbor crossed the street with a casserole dish she didn't know how to hand to me without apologizing. She hesitated on my porch, then said, carefully, "I saw Daniel yesterday." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I already knew what came next. A week later, a photograph arrived from someone I barely knew. Daniel at a restaurant, not alone, not hiding, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. The date on the image mattered more than the image itself. It was before I even fully came home. That was the first time I understood something I didn't want to understand. My injuries hadn't destroyed the marriage. They had just removed the reason he felt he needed to pretend. And I was still learning how to walk through a life that had already moved on without me. But I didn't know yet that the courtroom was waiting. And neither did he. The judge's voice pulled me back before I realized I had drifted too far inside my own memory. "Mrs. Carter." I blinked. The courtroom came back in pieces first. The fluorescent lights, the stillness, Daniel's posture slightly forward like he was bracing for something he couldn't see yet. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. She held the file open, but her eyes weren't on the page anymore. "This operation," she asked slowly, "was classified?" It was. "And it has since been declassified?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once and turned another page. The sound of paper felt too loud again. Across the room, I felt Daniel before I looked at him. That familiar shift in the air when someone realizes they are not standing on solid ground anymore. But I didn't understand it yet, not fully, because memory doesn't unfold all at once. It comes in layers, like something your mind is only willing to return in pieces. And that courtroom, strangely, became a place where those pieces started to rise. Not forward, backward. To mornings that didn't feel like they would become important later. Mornings like the first time I stood in my own kitchen after the hospital. I remember gripping the counter harder than I admitted to anyone. The tiles were cold through my socks. Noah was asleep in the next room, breathing softly through the baby monitor. And my left leg, I remember bargaining with it in silence. Just hold, just 10 steps. The first step felt like something cracking open inside me. Not pain exactly, more like learning a language I had forgotten. The second step, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I didn't fall. That felt impossible enough to be absurd. By the third step, I was crying without understanding why. Not dramatic crying, just quiet relief I didn't know where to put. I didn't tell Daniel about it. He had already stopped asking about anything that didn't fit neatly into recovery summaries or doctor updates. He still came home at first, not always at the same time, not always staying long. I remember one evening he sat at the kitchen table while I tried to fold laundry one-handed. The basket kept slipping off my lap. The rain outside tapped the window in a rhythm that made the silence inside feel louder. "You should rest," he said. "I am resting," I answered without looking up. But I wasn't. Rest had started to feel like another word for falling behind. He watched me for a moment longer than usual. Not with concern. Something else. Something I didn't recognize then. Like he was measuring how long this version of life would continue. I folded a small onesie and held it too long before placing it in the basket. Noah's clothes were so small they made everything else feel temporary. Daniel stood up before I finished the laundry. "I have work early," he said. The door closed behind him before I could ask anything else. That was the first time I remember the house feeling different after he left. Not empty, just quieter in a way that felt intentional. But I didn't name it that at the time. I told myself he was adjusting. People adjust in different ways, I thought. I kept telling myself that for longer than I should have. Because it is easier to believe in confusion than in choice. A week later, he returned with an envelope. I remember the exact sound of it hitting the kitchen counter. Not loud, but final. I was standing near the sink when I noticed it. "What's this?" I asked. He didn't sit down. "I already signed everything." That sentence didn't make sense immediately. My mind tried to place it somewhere safer. Work papers, insurance, something administrative. I opened it anyway. The first page felt like it didn't belong in my hands. Divorce. The word didn't feel real at first, just printed ink. "What are you talking about?" I asked quietly. He leaned against the counter like he needed distance from my reaction. "We can't keep living like this." I looked at him. Not the way I look at him now, then, trying to find the version of him I used to know. "We have a baby, Daniel." "I know. I'm recovering." "I know." My voice got smaller without me choosing it. "I can't even lift Noah properly yet." His eyes flicked briefly toward my leg, then away again. That small movement said more than anything else he had said that day. "I didn't sign up for a life where I'm responsible for everything," he said. Everything. As if I had become a category instead of a person. I remember gripping the edge of the counter. Not because I thought I would fall, because I suddenly didn't trust the floor. "And Noah?" I asked. "He'll be okay." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He left the envelope there, and he left the house not long after. I remember standing in the kitchen long after the door closed. The rain started again outside. The envelope didn't move, but something inside me did. Not breaking. Not yet. Just shifting into a place I didn't know how to name. The next days became a sequence of small absences. His toothbrush gone. His side of the closet emptied too quickly to feel accidental. Photographs missing one by one, leaving lighter shapes on the walls. Not destruction, erasure. Michael noticed first. He came by early one morning like he always did. He didn't ask questions at the door. He just stepped inside and looked around once. "You want coffee?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He made it the way I liked without needing instructions. Then he looked at the empty hallway again. He didn't even say goodbye properly, did he? I shook my head. I think he thinks he did. Michael didn't respond right away. He just leaned against the counter, watching Noah sleep in my arms. "People show you who they are when things get hard," he said quietly. I didn't answer, because I wasn't ready to agree with him yet. I still wanted a different explanation, even if I couldn't find one. That night, after Michael left, Noah cried longer than usual. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to stand, failing, trying again. My leg didn't respond the way I wanted. My ribs pulled sharply when I leaned too far. I finally lifted Noah anyway, slowly, carefully. Every movement measured in pain I pretended not to feel. He fell asleep against my chest eventually, and I remember thinking, this is still mine, even if everything else is leaving. Days blurred after that. Physical therapy mornings, doctor appointments, learning how to carry groceries without dropping them halfway, learning how to balance Noah on one hip while holding a bottle in the other hand, learning how to exist in a body that no longer obeyed the life I used to have. But life didn't wait for me to catch up. It simply continued, and slowly, without asking permission, it started becoming something else. Michael stayed consistent. He never asked if I was okay in a way that required a perfect answer. He just showed up, fixed things without announcing it, left food without turning it into charity. One morning, I remember him repairing a loose cabinet hinge while Noah watched him like he was studying a new kind of language. "You're teaching him bad habits," I said. "Like what?" "That men fix things." Michael smirked without looking up. "I'll let you break something next time. Balance it out." I laughed before I could stop myself. It surprised me more than him. My parents called every night. My mother sent packages that arrived like small apologies from another state. My father told Noah stories that made him laugh so hard he forgot to ask questions about absence. And slowly, without me noticing the exact moment, it stopped feeling like we were missing something. It started feeling like we were building something new. Not perfect, but stable. 18 months after the accident, the Army medical retirement papers came through. I remember holding the final paperwork longer than necessary, as if it might change meaning if I looked at it differently. For 22 years, I had known exactly what I was. Now I wasn't sure what came next. Then the phone rang. "Emma?" I almost dropped it when I heard the voice. "Colonel Foster." A pause. "I hear retirement is making you soft." I exhaled something close to a laugh. "I have a 4-year-old. "That explains everything," she said. "You've run out of excuses." I didn't even hesitate when she offered the civilian logistics position. No deployments, no command, just structure. And work that made sense again. When I accepted, I remember sitting down afterward because my body suddenly felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Life didn't fix itself, but it started moving forward again. Not because it healed, because it had no choice. And somewhere during that slow rebuilding, I stopped waiting for Daniel to come back. I didn't announce it to myself. It just happened one morning when I realized I hadn't checked the door in days. But I didn't know then that the court was already preparing to reopen. Everything I had learned to live without. And that Daniel, was about to remember I still existed in a way he had stopped expecting. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the courthouse wasn't the people. It was the silence. Not the quiet kind, the waiting kind. The kind that feels like a room already holding its breath for something it knows is coming. I held the same worn leather folder tighter than I needed to. Inside it were 10 years of ordinary life. School records, medical notes, attendance sheets, photographs that didn't look important until someone decided they were. Nothing dramatic, just proof that I had stayed. Daniel sat across the aisle like he had never left order behind. Tailored suit, straight posture, that same controlled expression I used to mistake for stability. Beside him, his wife sat with the kind of calm that doesn't come from confidence alone. It comes from certainty that nothing unexpected will happen. I used to think certainty was something earned. Now I know it can also be something assumed. Judge Eleanor Watkins entered exactly on time. The courtroom rose. We sat. And the case began. For nearly an hour, Daniel's attorney spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. Combat injuries, physical limitations, emotional strain. Military trauma presented like a list of disqualifications rather than a history of survival. At one point he said the word disabled so casually it sounded like it belonged in paperwork, not in a life. I remember looking down at my folder instead of him. Because looking at him still did something I didn't trust. When it was our turn, Linda Brooks didn't argue. She simply opened the folder, one document at a time. School attendance, medical evaluations, teacher statements, employment records, photographs of birthdays where Noah leaned into me like I was the only fixed point in the room. Each page was quiet evidence of something I had never thought needed proving. That I was there, every day. At some point, Daniel shifted in his seat. Not much, but enough. Like something in the narrative he had prepared wasn't aligning with what was being shown. He still didn't look at me. Not once. That part still surprised me even then, because I remembered a time when he used to look at me like I was the center of every decision he made. I just didn't realize yet that people don't always look away because they are confident. Sometimes they look away because they are afraid of what they'll recognize. Then Daniel was called to the stand. He adjusted his tie before sitting down, a small, practiced movement. "I love my son," he said immediately. Clear voice, controlled tone, like repetition had made it believable. Linda didn't respond right away. She let the silence sit for a moment longer than comfort allows. Then she stood. "When was the last birthday party you attended for Noah?" Daniel blinked. "I don't remember the exact date." Linda nodded once. "Was it within the last 5 years?" A pause. "I think so." I remember Noah at 5, waiting near the window for a door that never opened. I didn't say it out loud. Linda continued. "When was his last parent-teacher conference?" He hesitated. "I can't recall." "What grade is he in now?" "Middle school." "And his favorite subject?" "Science." Linda glanced at her notes. "It's history." That small correction didn't sound dramatic, but something in the room shifted anyway, like everyone understood what it meant without needing explanation. Daniel tried again. "He likes both." Linda didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "What size shoes does your son wear?" Silence. "What allergies does he have?" Another silence. I remember the sound of him breathing becoming more noticeable than his words. I don't remember," he finally said. Linda nodded slightly. No further questions. And she sat down. Not because she had more to say, because she didn't need to. The silence filled everything he couldn't. Judge Watkins looked down at the file again, then up. "I would like to review the complete military record of Mrs. Carter before making any determination." The clerk returned minutes later with a sealed folder, thicker than I remembered, heavier than I wanted it to be. I felt Daniel straighten beside me, like this was the moment he had been waiting for, like the story he believed was about to finally confirm itself. The judge opened it, page by page. Service history, promotions, evaluations, awards, medical reports. Daniel's posture eased slightly as he watched. I think he believed he understood what he was about to see. Injuries, loss, evidence that would support what he had been arguing. But he had never asked what came before those injuries. He only ever saw the moment things became difficult for him. The judge stopped halfway, read one section, then read it again. Her expression didn't change dramatically, but her attention sharpened, like something had just shifted from background to foreground. This operation was classified at the time, she said. Yes, I answered, and declassified later. Yes, Your Honor. She nodded, then turned another page. And that was when the room changed. Not suddenly, quietly, like a weight being placed somewhere no one expected. Daniel leaned forward slightly. His hands tightened on the edge of the table, and for the first time in years I saw something in his face I didn't recognize at first. Not anger, not confidence, something closer to disbelief trying to hold itself together. The judge stopped again. Her eyes stayed on the page longer this time. Then she looked up. This court has not been given Mrs. Carter's full operational record. The words landed differently than anything before them, because they weren't opinion. They were correction. Daniel shook his head once. No, he said quickly. That's not… No. His voice cracked slightly on the second word. That can't be right. And then it happened. The moment I had been living toward without knowing it. The judge continued reading silently for several seconds. Then she lowered the file slightly and looked directly at me. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, she said. A title I hadn't heard spoken in a courtroom in a long time. Yes, ma'am, I answered. Her eyes didn't leave mine. Is it correct that you led the forward recovery operation during the Kandahar evacuation? I felt the air in the room tighten. Yes. A pause, and that you personally entered a compromised vehicle under live fire conditions to extract personnel? I swallowed once. Yes. The courtroom didn't move. Even the sound seemed to pause. And that your actions resulted in the survival of multiple service members who were otherwise declared lost at the scene. Yes, Your Honor. Silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't absence. It was recognition forming too late. I heard Daniel shift beside me. Not forward this time. Back. Just slightly. Like distance could undo what he was hearing. The judge closed the file gently. As this court understands it, she said carefully, these actions were not included in the initial submission provided by the petitioner. No, Your Honor, Linda said. And yet they are central to the medical condition being presented here today. Yes. She looked toward Daniel, not accusing, just observing. Daniel didn't speak. For the first time in the entire trial, he didn't have a prepared sentence. And I realized something sitting there that I hadn't understood before. He hadn't feared my injuries. He had feared the version of me he never bothered to know existed before them. Because that version made his assumptions collapse too cleanly. The judge set the file down. This court will take a short recess before continuing. Gavel, sound of movement, people exhaling like they had been underwater. But I stayed seated for a moment longer, because something inside me hadn't caught up yet. Not triumph, not relief. Something quieter, like an old wound finally being seen instead of ignored. As people began to stand and move, I noticed Daniel still sitting, not looking at me, not looking at the file, just staring at nothing in particular. Like for the first time, he couldn't decide what version of reality to hold on to. And I realized then, this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of consequences he hadn't planned for. And I hadn't either.